Hello, this is Carl from Denmark. This is kind of second part of a video I made a little time ago about songs Beatles covered. Not Beatles originals, but songs they covered. And among them, the more obvious ones, there were some that could seem a little bit more obscure, and why did they play that song? And how did they even know it? And such things. And I was talking in that video about the Sheik of Araby and A Taste of Honey. Well, in this video I will go into discussing a pair of other songs that the Beatles had on their repertoire in their early days, and was not exactly what you would call an rock and roll standard. In the previous video I was talking about A Taste of Honey from Please Please Me. On the next album with the Beatles, the one you could say stick out as not a Beatles original, and among those covers not what you would call a rock and roll standard. Well, that is of course Till There Was You, which is originally from a musical called The Music Man, and was one of the hit songs from that musical. And you know, just like Old Man River from The Showboat, or Summertime from Porgy and Bess, well, it has been recorded by a lot of artists and not recorded in any way with relation to the musical. Well, you also have it in newer examples. Memory from Cats, and Don't Cry for Me Argentina from Evita. And you know, of course, it's quite obvious when you make a musical, it's a lot of songs. It would be a bit of a failure if not just one of them became a hit. So there usually is a 2 or 3 hit songs, and usually one that is sort of the big hit. And I guess you can say that about Till There Was You from The Music Man. So a lot of our other artists recorded it, and the recording I think is the one we should pay attention to is by Peggy Lee, because it seems to be that recording that Beatles have heard and based their recording on. There are some similarities. There are also some differences. Beatles gave it their own twist, but it is quite clear that they had been listening to Peggy Lee's version. So I think that's the one. That at least would be my guess. Another interesting fact about Till There Was You is that it is the first mainly acoustic recording, well, officially a recording from Parlophone. If you go through Please Please Me, well, there are some ballads on it. It's not pure rock and roll all the way. There are some ballads, but it's still electric guitars. They are playing a bit more quiet and softly, but it's still electric. Pure electric music all the way through. And then you get to With the Beatles and put that on, and during the first series of songs, yes, still electric, but then close to the end of side 1, suddenly acoustic guitars. John and George are changing to acoustic guitars. Ringo is playing, I guess it's bongo drums, some kind of hand drums. The only electric instrument is Paul's bass. And as you all know, on the following albums, there would be a lot more of acoustic guitars and using that much more. But this was the first time they did it on an officially released recording. As you probably all know, there is a earlier version. They also played it at the Decca session. There they played it in an electric version, but besides that, there's not that much difference. It is quite clear that they had made this arrangement, and that is how they played it, more or less. They given it a little twist on that second version, and that's natural. You know, as you probably know, the Decca session was the 1st of January in 1962, and the recordings for With the Beatles, you know, they recorded Please Please Be early in the year, and so later on in the year they recorded With the Beatles. So we are in late 63, so it's almost 2 years. And of course, something has happened there. And also outside the Beatles and other music, or all sorts of things were going on. And they were probably inspired by some of those things that went on. I can't go into talking about all that. This video would be far too long. But look down in the comment section, because I put some links there to some things you can listen to if you want to get an idea of what was going on at that moment in those 2 years, 62, 63. As Beatles fans, it's often like we think that Beatles was the only thing that was going on. And it sometimes seems that, because, you know, they break through and they got enormously popular, and so, but there were other things going on at the same times, and some of them were actually quite interesting. And I guess if you like early Beatles, like those 2 first albums, I think you're gonna like a lot of that other stuff that was going on at the time, and it would sort of put things into a perspective. But of course, it's your choice. If you say I'm not interested in that, well, forget about it. But the possibility is here. Just look down at the comment field. One thing I forgot to mention, now speaking of other things going on, the reason I am referring to Peggy Lee's version as the one Beatles probably based their version on is because she gave Till There Was You a kind of Latin touch in the rhythm, and that is what Beatles took and used in their own way, you can say. But that is what they adapted, that Latin feel in it that you do not find in earlier versions. So it was Peggy Lee that put that Latin feel into it, and Beatles saw the possibilities in that. And that's why Peggy Lee's version is important in this context. Well, just one more thing about that. Almost the same arrangement. For instance, George is playing the same solo, but with a little bitty twist, and with that change from electric to acoustic instruments. And that makes a difference. When you listen to the Decca session, it didn't it don't stick out as so different than the other songs. While when you hear with the Beatles, well, it is something. Oh, that's a bit different. Not that there haven't been surprises before. I mean, you put please, please, sorry, with the Beatles on, and it starts with all with it won't be long. Sorry, it won't be long. And that song is so full of surprises, and so you opened up with that sort of really, what do you call it? There's a good Danish word for it. I don't know the English counterpart, but you know, really something going on. And then that more calmed down, all I gotta do, which is a kind of a new thing on the Beatles palette. Doesn't sound like anything they had done before. And then the fantastic All My Loving. And everybody back then was thinking, why don't they put that out on a single? And then, well, we are introduced to George as a songwriter with his first contribution to the Beatles song collection, Don't Bother Me. And how is it? That was Won't Be Long, All I Gotta Do, All My Loving, Don't Bother Me. And there is 7 songs, so it's so it's Little Child, yeah. Kind of quite aggressive song, actually. Not in the lyrics, but it's a very heart pumping rocker, and and there for the first time you have that different harmonica sound, different from that trademark of Love Me Do, Please Please Me, From Me to You. And so they are changing to acoustic instruments and playing this kind of show tune. And then it ends with a bang with Please Mr. Postman, originally recorded by the Marvelettes, and they do a good job on it. I met a lot of people who didn't knew about the original by the Marvelettes, and actually thought it was an original Beatles song. And I think it's quite common that people think that and think, oh, please, 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 Mr. Postman, Beatles made that. They made a recording of it, but no, they didn't wrote it, and they weren't the first to record it, but they really did a good job on it. We can agree on that, most of us, I guess. They really did a good job on it. And it's one of those many funny examples of all those songs they knew, and thinking about how hard a schedule they had, and with all those all-night concerts in Hamburg shortly before and now, when they were starting to get famous, they had well, shorter shows, but a lot of them, and then they were playing on the radio, and then they had a concert there, and then miles away, way in another place. They had a concert. A very hard schedule, and they have had that all the time. Be, before they got popular, I mentioned those extremely many hours of playing in Hamburg, and you ask yourself, when did they have time to get to know all these songs? They know God knows how many songs, and some of them quite obscure. It wasn't something that has been a big hit. Well, Please Mr. Postman had been a hit, but I mean, look at Please Me album with James' um original recording, recorded by an very little known group called the Cookies. Uh, and you may say it's not the best song on Please Please Me. Well, maybe not, but they knew it and they played it. An obscure recording by an more or less unknown group called the Cookies. Who the fuck have ever heard about the Cookies? Well, the Beatles had. How and when, I honestly don't know. And it's so surprising. You ask yourself, when did they have time to get to know all these songs? But one thing, even though you might think that Chains is not the best song on Please Please Me, it is actually written by Carole King. Well, not her best moment. It's not exactly Will You Love Me Tomorrow. We can agree on that, but still it is written by Carole King. And there's Baby It's You, there's written about by Burt Bacharach. So that's one thing. No matter what you might think of Please Please Me and how good or bad an album you think that is, half of the songs are Beatles originals, and those who are covers are actually some of them written by some of the best established songwriters that were around at that time. And of course, Anna by Arthur Alexander, one of John Lennon's favorite singers and songwriters. And the remarkable thing is, even though there were this extreme progression and development later on, when they got better and better and were doing more and more original things, even back then they were quite good songwriters. And it's not when there is a Beatles or regional, say you saying, oh, now they are trying to do something themselves. It don't stand back. So I mean, an album debuting band that actually managed to make a collection of songs that is on level with the best established songwriters at the moment. That's a pretty good job. You must admit that. No matter how much you admire what later happened and that development and progression and how much that happened. It's still a good job. You must admit that.